Welcome to Campus Connections, a podcast dedicated to connecting with one another. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube, and you may contact us by writing in the comment section or writing to us at podcast@mcccollege.edu. We would love to hear your positive feedback and your thoughts on any future topics you would like to hear. I am your host, Geovanny Mayorga, and we are recording from downtown Chicago. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, I grew up playing soccer, and soccer will always be the sport I am most passionate about. I don't play it as much anymore, other than playing with my kids or at a family gathering, but I do love to watch professional leagues and international competitions. I have a picture, which is my favorite picture of me as a child, where I am in front of my house in Guatemala City, basically, in the concrete street. And in the picture, I am about to kick the soccer ball, and I have this kicking motion pose, which I love because I look back at this picture of a little kid playing, and it brings fond memories of being with my best friend that I grew up playing. His name is Max. Max, love you, buddy. Hope you're doing well. And Max and I, we used to play like any child. And we fantasize about being one of the great players, either kicking or being goalie. And we would celebrate like we had actually won something. Then, of course, we grew up and realized that we're not that good after all. What a bummer. Today, I'll speak with a colleague who has a similar soccer and education background as I do, Drew Wentzel. So, Drew, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited that you're here. How are you feeling today?
Doing good. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Happy that you're here. We've had great conversations in the past, so I'm looking forward to another great conversation. So, let's start by talking about what you do now, what your position is, how many years you've been here, and how lucky you are to be here.
Well, like you said, Gio, I am very lucky to be here. Again, my name is Drew. I'm in the financial aid department, financial aid coordinator. Coming up actually next month, I will have been at MCC for 2 years. So, have learned a lot over 2 years. I think you learn quite a bit from day to day. I work with a great set of teammates to my left and my right in the department. And you are exactly right. I am very lucky and very happy to be here. Been at a couple different schools in the past. Not the best of experiences. Was in a different department before, so something to be said about that. But glad to have found the MCC family for sure.
You started in a different department here?
No, at a different school.
Oh, different school. You started different.
Yeah. So when I originally sought to be in higher ed after my undergrad, I knew I wanted to stay in higher ed, and when I went home, ended up taking a position over at Colorado Technical University at their Schaumburg location out in the suburbs. And I was in the admissions department, and it turned out to be very much like a call center. So I found out really quickly selling education over the phone was very, very hard for me. I like to get to know people in person, get to know them first, develop those connections, and then try to get down to that nitty-gritty of why is school going to better yourself. Now, financial aid's a little different. You don't get into the heart of those conversations as much, but inherently, you're still opening up to the student because at the end of the day, school's not cheap, but we're here to help. We're here to figure out what's best for them and how we can kind of align those interests.
Yeah, you do a great job. Thank you for that. Now, you spoke a little bit about being in higher education, and I know you and I spoke about your individual education, and you have a master's degree. Initially, you started in economics. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was being completely blunt. That was born out of what's probably going to be the best fallback of a undergrad degree if certain other interests don't really take flight. So to expand a little bit more about that, my minor in undergrad was studio art. So, that was,
nice.
I'm sure, really happy that the parents found that out. But, I've always taken an interest in art, and I couldn't fully let it go. But then I think that's where I took the completely 180 degree of trying to go in economics because, I hear a lot of people when they're not sure what to do, they're like, we'll go for business. Learn the hard way. Economics is not business. It's not finance. It's not accounting. It's very much theoretical. So, to be honest, if I could go back to undergrad, I don't think I would do econ. There's some classes I liked, some classes I didn't. But
do you still do art? Do you do anything with it, like sketches?
No,
paintings?
the one of the best classes in undergrad that I took was a ceramics class. So it was, molding clay on the wheel. It was very dirty, but as some people might know, if you've done those kind of classes before, you don't just have a wheel lying around. I'm sure there's classes in certain areas where you might live, but that's not something I'm just going to spend a few $100s on just because that's not not a hobby that I'm willing to invest in at this point in my life. But it was really fun. I really liked it. Certainly helped the GPA.
Nice. I have a friend from high school that is an artist, does like oil paintings, does sketches. He's actually very good. He has good following, and he does it as a hobby. I had a conversation with him not too long ago, and I said, why don't you do this full time? Of course, an artist is difficult to live solely on being an artist, but most of his big paintings are a little dark, so he has a darker way of doing his paintings, which I'm not too fond of that.
Mm-hmm.
But some of his most colorful ones that I really, really like. He has his community of the artists he communicates with are also very good. I also didn't start. I actually have my bachelor's in physical education, but I didn't start as physical education. I actually started as an engineer, and I have a ton of background in math, calculus, triple integrals, physics, which I like physics.
Ooh, no.
But at some point, it was like, this is just like when I started getting into infinities, and I'm like, I can't quite, put things together anymore. So that's when I ended up switching to phys ed, and I got my degree in physical education, got a teaching degree, a lot of endorsements that you have to come with it. But and then I have my my master's in sport management. You decided to get a master's degree in higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the thought behind that? From going from art, econ, and then, and which a lot of people do. The previous, I previously worked at an institution where I predominantly recruited students who wanted to go into teaching, and there were programs that would cater to people from other degrees to go into education. What was your thought behind going into the education field?
So during undergrad, there were a lot of experiences in which I took and had that directly correlated with advising, mentorship, getting to know underclassmen. And, obviously at a certain point in undergrad, you have to declare a major, and there's just no going back. So, roll with the econ, take it for what it's worth. But there was actually a program at my alma mater, which was Denison University. They have a program called Juno, short for June Orientation. And the main objective of the program is to allow incoming freshmen, obviously during the month of June, lasts a day and a half for each session, where they come on a campus, if they haven't taken their placement test, they take those, they meet their classmates, they sign up for classes, they get to see campus. So essentially you take a lot of the nerves and the fear out of coming to campus for the very first time in August, and you get to meet a lot of underclassmen. And so basically between sophomore, junior, and senior year, I was a Juno advisor is what they call them. So you get a group of about 5 to 7 students per group. There's 5 sessions within each year. And you help them acclimate a little bit. Obviously, everybody, for the most part, they're organized pretty randomly, right? So you could be in a group with athletes, music majors, people who are coming on scholarship, international students. It could be just a whole range of things. And I learned that I really gravitated towards that kind of environment, just being in higher ed. And I think I've also gravitated towards that level of student. I think a lot of teachers and people who in teaching and education in general gravitate towards a certain age group and what they feel they can most relate to or accommodate or just feel comfortable with. And I like having those conversations where I can talk to them as adults, but still help them understand what college is meant to be, how it's meant to help you, and how it can really shape the rest of your life. So it's big conversations formulated into small conversations to take light of the fact that this is a serious step, but we're very much here to help you and how we can do that. So really love that experience. And so when I left college, I was like, I don't really like econ, but I loved doing what I did outside of my major, which was working with students. So it's like, how can I put myself in another position like that at another school, maybe not at Denison, which is in Ohio, and either develop organizations at existing schools that don't have them, or how can I better organizations that schools already have for those types of instances. And so that's the kind of the main goal, the trajectory of what I'm looking to do in higher ed. It's just help students and student organizations.
Because I've been doing operations for a few years now. When I was at Ball State, I did part of my graduate assistantship. I was working for the recreation department and working with student organizations who wanted to hold events. I remember one time we were doing, it was not Battle of the Bands, but it was bands coming out and performing. One particular day, there was bad weather coming in, and the band was just getting started. And I said, listen, you need to pay attention to the weather because it's moving in fast. We're not going to have time to get this, your performance in. Of course, college kids want to get their performance in, and I said, look at the clouds. I'm like, it's coming in pretty fast. So I'm going to stop your setup right now because we're not going to have time. By the time you set up, the weather's going to be on top of us. It's going to ruin your entire set. Audio equipment is very expensive.
Yes.
I should know. And sure enough, the first side of lightning, and they still wanted to do it. I said, no, we're going to cancel it right now. And I apologized, and I went through that. They pleaded and pleaded and pleaded that they wanted to. I said, no, we're not going to do it. Like 5 minutes later, like the storm was on top of us. And I mean, they were like rushing to get their equipment off the stage and into their cars. And they're like, oh my God, we're so thankful that you decided to cancel it. I'm like, there's a reason why I have this job and why I'm trying to help you make the proper decision. And I've had, when I worked at the University of Chicago, I did the same thing, doing student, in charge of athletic facilities, and students would come in, student organizations. So I'm very familiar with that. We also have a similar background in soccer. You and I both played soccer as children and played in college. How was your experience? My experience, I'm sure it's a little bit different than yours. We'll talk about how different. But how was your experience growing up, going to high school, going to college, and now apparently you're still coaching, which I don't coach anymore. I've thought about coaching my kids, especially the way I see some of the coaches today, and it's just like, but it's a commitment. So, how was your soccer experience?
Soccer has been a very constant force in my life. I think everyone should have one, regardless of what it is. And like you said, sometimes it fades and sometimes it comes back, right? Sometimes there's just dormant periods in which life takes over and it can't be as consistent as you'd like it to be. And that's the beauty of having a childhood where if you have a good family and a good surrounding environment that enables that to just grow. But started in kindergarten, went all the way through. It was really nice for my parents because my sister also played soccer. So, there were times where one parent had to go to one game and the other parent had to go to the other game because, there's not always the luxury of being 2 home games at the same place at the same time. And so certainly also fortunate to always have someone in the crowd being a fan of mine. That's always huge. And looking back on it as a kid, I don't think you fully take that in on what that's worth and what it's for. And super appreciative of that. But, definitely a highlight of my life was in high school. My sister and I are 3 years apart. And so she was a senior when I was a freshman. And having grown up in soccer and taking a really strong passion for it, I wanted to be good at it. And so I did make varsity my freshman year, and I was able to play with my sister on varsity, which was just, in and of itself, was a great memory. Mm-hmm. Obviously didn't win everything, but we did make my only run to state was with that team, with her. So that was super fun. But other than that, college was one of the best times of my life. I think one of the main things that I remembered was that before I left freshman year, basically stressed out of my mind because I was like, I don't know anybody here. I don't really like meeting new people, which is crazy to think that I went to a school where I knew nobody. My dad was like, these are going to be the fastest 4 years of your life. And I was like, I really hope they are because I don't want to be here. I'm so terrified. And I look back and I'm like, man, I wish I could go back. I wish I could read. I wish it was longer. And then there's other parts where it's like, I don't wish it was longer because you take everything in stride, which is the tests, the studying, the homework, the finals, all that stuff. But that's why you have great memories, because there's obviously less fun moments that make the other fun moments more fun. But no, absolutely loved it. And I think that's why I continue to do what I do today, is that even if you're not playing, even if you're not coaching, especially with things like when the World Cup rolls around, when the Olympics roll around, and you remember that excitement that you had when you started a game, when you went up against a hard play and a tough player, you still get riled up, which is, like I said, everybody should have that kind of passion for something, whatever it is. But it is just so fun to watch good players play. And even, who knows? I don't know if I'll be a parent, someday in the future that I'll want to coach my kids. Maybe I just won't be. I'll be that parent that's off to the side that doesn't want to hear other parents what I say underneath my breath. But no, soccer has always been a consistent force in my life, and I don't see it going anywhere anytime fast.
One of the hardest things for me now as a parent watching my kids, because my kids are in a club, but it's still the recreational side, not the travel side, which is a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
And I still find that, at least with the club that they're participating in now, that is treated much like recreational, and there's not a whole lot of, and maybe because a lot of times the coaching is volunteer, but there's not a whole lot of knowledge of the sport itself, and that becomes frustrating to me, because I'm like, that's not the way you're supposed to do things. That's not the way you're supposed to coach your kid, and that frustration comes out. Now I've toned it back a lot, because the club starts sending emails about parents need to be quiet on sideline, and I'm like, I would if the coaches would be doing their jobs. Anyway,
I think you were CC'd indirectly on that one.
I think so. Yes, very much so. When I went to high school, and I only played 1 year, my senior year, even though my friends would always tell me, come play with us. My junior year, I think they made it to state. They won the city championship, which is a huge deal, because I went to Chicago Public Schools, Schurz High School. Yay. And my junior year, they made it to state. So winning the city championship was a big deal for the school. So my senior year, I finally joined the team, only to find out that we were coaching ourselves, because the coach was non-existent. After we graduated, we didn't really do well my senior year. After, a friend of mine and I, we were trying to get into the Chicago Sockers, which at the time was like a farm team to the Chicago Fire. And we were already practicing with on a practice squad, somewhat of a practice. We kind of just like snuck in as a practice players. And we went back to our high school to ask the coach for a reference letter. And I'm never going to forget. He's like, yeah, those guys over there are really big. I don't know. I'm like, are you serious? Why did we even bother coming here?
Yeah, that's always a tough situation. It's almost like, and I hear this a lot, really, especially from even older people than me, previous generations, where they say, a lot of what sports teaches you prepares you for the real world. And I do believe there are direct correlations in that, and, they'll give you sports analogies to try to relate to what you're doing at work. And at the end of the day, sometimes those things are very cliche to me. But, I mean, you do look back on it, and, a bad coach is just as bad as a bad boss. And it's like, how do you teach yourself how to play soccer? How do you teach yourself to do your job on your own? And it's a tough situation to be in.
Absolutely.
So.
I went to Oakton, and I played on the team 2 years, captain. Again, coach was not very good. The first year, it was the coach's first year as well. I kid you not, we were like the movie The Bad News Bears, which is about baseball. If people don't know, just to give people listeners, a quick background on the movie The Bad News Bears. It's about a baseball team and the children. It's about children. The children are really the wimpier, non-athletic kids. That's
a nice way of putting it.
That's a nice way of putting it. That's how I remember my first year at Oakton. It was like a Bad News Bears team, and I'm like, is this how it's supposed to be? The second year, a young lady joined our team. We didn't have a women's soccer team, so a young lady joined our team. We made it to the playoffs. Well, the first year we won maybe like two games, maybe. Second year, my dad came on as coach, and then we were about 8-8 or 9-7, something like that. Made it to the playoffs, lost in penalty kicks.
Ooh.
But yeah, and then after that, couple years later, one of my female cousins was the first one to start the women's soccer team at Oakton. Now, you and I spoke on a different conversation about the women's national team, U.S. women's national team.
Yeah.
Now their coach is gone.
Thank God.
And you did hear from the U.S. captain that things weren't that well, which you could tell, I think, from seeing them play.
Oh yeah, you can tell when everyone's on the same page, and it's hard. You're human. You're gonna let things that are off the field affect things that are on the field, and that's why it's very much true when they say, just in a simple vacuum example, the way you practice is the way you play. The same way that like the environment you're in will either feed or fester with how you're going to play on the pitch. And so a great coach has the ability, like we've seen, take them to new heights, championships, World Cup gold, and then you can also see them crash and burn, even with the talent that they have. If teams can't come together and if coaching staff can't provide support and help nurture what they can naturally do, then it doesn't matter how much talent you have in the world.
Yeah.
We're a great example of that.
What did you think about the eventual champion and what transpired before and then after that?
I think it's a real shame that this has taken the front seat in a lot of the news circles, that for a program having their first World Cup championship be overshadowed by 2 seconds on, and it's not even just national news, it's global news. This is the largest stage in most aspects of televised history. Like, there are very few other instances in our lifetime that get more viewership than the World Cup. Because athletics in general gets always a lot of viewership. because whether people are athletes or not, it draws viewership, period. And then you take the most popular sport in the world, and of course there's going to be people watching, and it's disheartening to see someone think that they're entitled to do whatever they want. And people might disagree with me with what we're saying here, but it's exactly what it is. It's pure entitlement to know that I can do this because of who I am, my stature, my title. And the fact that he was like, no, I'm not leaving was even more mind-blowing.
It's insane.
But, and people will say, well, if roles were reversed, there should still be outcry. And I agree. I think there should be outcry, but the point of the matter is you've never seen a woman do that to a man. I don't think women come from a position to have that much gall to do that, because we've always been pushed down. And so, again, I feel for those players that to have this great, amazing moment get completely shadowed by this instance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little mind-blowing. Not only that it happened, now his mother is involved because the mother is on a hunger strike.
Oh my gosh,
it's
didn't hear
insane.
about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And not only that, but then the player who scored the winning goal, the dad had passed.
I heard about that too, and I was just
that is insane. He passed the day before, and
yeah, it
the
wasn't even
family
during the
chose
game. It was
not to tell her, and then she goes ahead and scored the winning goal. That's
What do you think you would have done if you were her family? Do you think you would have told her?
No, I would have done the same thing.
I think I would agree with you. I think it would have been different in an instance in which maybe he would have been hospitalized, but not passed.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be, I think, to me, a harder decision whether to tell her or not. But I mean, it might sound cold, but fact of the matter is he wasn't coming back, and she was going to find out. But where do you put her headspace going into a game like that? And I think, from what I could tell, and again, everything, people are going to act differently in front of a camera, but I think she took it in stride, and I hope she comes to terms with their decision and where they were coming from. And ultimately, you can tell they tried to do what was best for her.
Right. Of
and
course.
It's almost like it kind of panned out for everybody because that she, scored the winning goal. She had actually scored the game winner of the previous goal too. And so she just had a phenomenal tournament. I think they were very much correct in making her the captain of that match.
Yeah.
Right, because I Googled who the captains were, and she didn't come up on a Google search.
Is that right?
Jenny Hermoso was one of the captains, but it was a different player who was listed as the second captain. It wasn't Olga Carmona, I believe is the last name.
Yeah, I think so.
She wasn't listed as a captain. And I think those coaching decisions to make players captains in certain games rather than for a tournament or a season.
I wonder if they knew, and that's why they made her captain. So
basically, like
they're knowing ahead of time and not telling her,
helping her rise to the occasion. Yeah, I hear you.
But the women's game has come a long way. I mean, if you
in such a short period of time.
Yes, the talent level that I saw in this World Cup was insane.
Oh, I said it during the tournament. I'll say it again. This was, if you've ever watched a March Madness tournament, I don't care if you don't like basketball, you've seen at some point a March Madness game. It very much had that feel, which is so refreshing for the women's game.
Yes.
Because even outside of soccer, a lot of teams that are powerhouses for a long time,
absolutely,
not technically, but normally don't get dethroned.
Right.
And that's where the U.S. women's team has been for a while. In other sports, it's just
Germany.
Right? And it's just like, it's almost, I don't want to say boring, because I do very much enjoy watching those teams play. But when it's almost so predictable about who's going to win, it takes some of the fun out of it, because then you're not on the edge of your seat of where it could go, of what could happen, of who's going to rise through. I mean, the amount of African nations this year and Caribbean nations that have shown up for their countries, and even the fact that some of the teams that have qualified for a World Cup for the very first time. I'm half Filipino, and I was super excited to see the Filipino team make it to the World Cup.
You can play for them?
Yeah, I would have a better shot with that team than the U.S. team. Let's be fair. But no, I think last time we talked, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because I get a lot of varying answers from people. And so in a championship game, would you rather be blown out or lose 1-0? And why?
I've always said I'm okay losing 1-0, but to me the hardest thing is losing at the last second or the last minute with the last second goal or last minute goal. That to me is a killer. If it's a close game, if it's 1-0 and I lose, I'm like, okay, we gave it everything we did. If I'm blown out, it'll be just like catastrophe. I'm like, I don't ever see myself playing a championship and then getting blown out, because then it's like I didn't deserve to be here, which is like, I think it's a different mindset then. But if I do 1-1, so I would not want to be blown out.
Okay.
Because then it's like I didn't deserve to be here, and this is clearly a better team, and we need to reevaluate what we're doing as a team. 1-0 is like, okay, I'll accept that. I do not want to get blown out any game, let alone a championship game.
So you're saying if you lose 1-0, it depends when you get scored on.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how you get scored on?
With soccer, and everybody says this, you can lose 1-0 and you could be the better team.
And I think, so to answer my own question, that's why I'd rather be blown out. Because I understand the sentiment of I don't feel like I should be here. But at the same time, if I got there, I deserve to be there. Now, if the other team was just outright better, then
yeah,
okay.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I see it both ways, but I think to put it simply, that night after the loss of that game, what's going to help me sleep better? Knowing that we could have won because we only lost 1-0. Regardless of how it's scored, right? It could have been an amazing goal, which kept an amazing team to 1-0. It could have been a PK, it could have been a bad breakaway, whatever it is. It's still 1-0. It's still a very achievable win, and to still not come out on top. Whereas, well,
it could be one of those where you're an overachiever and then you get blown out by a better team. So then, in that sense, it's just like, I wasn't supposed to be here anyway.
I know, and that's why I look at it. It's like, there's a lot of sports where you have to win multiple games to win a championship. Baseball is made that way. Basketball is done that way. Football is similar to us, where they get one game, one and done, right? You need to show up or you don't come out on top. And I think that's why it's easier for baseball players and basketball players to accept whether they've lost or won, because they've had chances. Maybe you don't show up for one game, but you dominate the next game. You only get the one game in soccer. You only get the one game in football.
Right.
And so it's like you need to show up. And that's why I think that 1-0 loss would hurt so bad.
That is true.
Right. And I'm thinking like blowout. Like blowout to me at a high level game would be like 3-0. Not like, I'm not talking about like rec soccer where it's like 8-0. Like that is okay. Maybe you don't deserve to be there if you're being blown out by 8-0.
It's difficult because then you get into different levels, and I've seen that playing ice hockey, but that's an entirely different conversation. I know you have to go. We can continue talking for another 30 minutes.
Probably longer.
Yes, and maybe we'll do this on a second episode, continue the conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for doing the podcast. I think it was a very easy conversation. I hope our listeners got that same sense as well. And looking forward to potentially doing another one down the line. I want to thank you for taking the time and remind the listeners that you can reach us at MCC or podcast at mcccollege.edu. And we look forward to speaking to you next time.